Hey guys, Caleb Breyer here, also known as Blitz and Burst. Just before the interview, to quickly say, if you want to skip through the team, go to individual mons, see the spread you like. I'll have but there should be buttons on the side for every single Pokemon, so you just can skip through the interview. But I do hope you watch it in its entirety because I had a great time interviewing Toler and thought he had a lot of insightful things to say about his team, his experience in the Pokemon metagame overall. So I hope you enjoy watching. Toler, how's it going?
I'm doing pretty well. It's a little far out from the event, but hopefully I can still
It,
give
it,
pretty
it it
accurate.
hasn't been that long. We're like in between Nats and Worlds, so this is like the perfect time.
It's still a little while out, I think.
Fine. We'll just get into this then. All right. So right here, you agreed with me and just gave me your entire pace bin here. So we have your full team here.
hmm
Let's just jump into this, Toler. Where would you like to start off?
Right, I think I'm just going to go left to right with this because this was
Okay.
actually order of construction. The team was put together from ideas that I had already worked with
Mm-hmm.
for a while beforehand, so the actual putting the mons together in the team builder took about 5 minutes. But when it came to actually synthesizing and theorizing the whole team, um, it took me a really long time to figure out exactly what I wanted to bring to the national championships. So I'm going to start with Politoed,
Okay.
which is our leftmost Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
Politoed was used because when I built this team, I had been playing with Gardevoir already for a while, and I thought, and I was talking actually with Inosh, as I mentioned in my nationals interview,
Mm-hmm.
about Rain Steel as an effective general archetype that functioned well against a lot of teams that were relying on fire types to beat Aegislash, and Aegislash being one of the strongest Pokemon, I think, is an anti-meta choice going to Nationals
Mm-hmm.
because of its resistances and how effective it was against things like Sand.
Opposing
Sometimes Sun,
Gardevoir.
actually. It was one of the most effective steals against Sun because it could run Wide Guard and punish teams that were
Uh,
relying on Heat Wave to knock out steel types and things of that nature.
Another common Pokemon like Landorus.
Right. Yeah, and it walled off Landorus, which is a big problem. So I thought, okay, what if I do a defensive core of Politoed Aegislash and mix that with the Gardevoir that I've been testing already? So I did Politoed.
Mm-hmm.
This is a modest Politoed, which has enough physical bulk, I believe, to take a Salamence. Actually, I believe it's Jolly Kangaskhan returns.
Okay.
Um, as far as I know for sure. And then it takes Salamence double edges about 75% of the time.
Okay. That's Jolly
And
Salamence.
I believe so, yeah. Adamant Salamence would do a lot more. I
Yeah.
think it's 50% with Adamant.
Okay.
Um, and then it has the special attack to knock it out in one hit, the Salamence, with Ice Beam.
Okay.
Uh, and it should also knock out most Landorus in one hit with Scald or Ice Beam.
Mm-hmm.
The thing about Scald and Ice Beam, there was actually a situation in my match against Rafael Bagara in the finals where I scalded turn 1 of game 1 instead of Ice Beaming. And that might confuse some players because you think Ice Beam, 4 times super effective, it does the most damage. But in the rain, super effective Scald actually has about the same power as Ice Beam. It actually fluctuates depending, the amount of damage it does fluctuates depending on what kind of spread they're running. So Scald will sometimes do more when there are more EVs, I think,
Mm-hmm.
and Ice Beam will do more than when there are less EVs. But it's not a significant difference.
There's also the chance for the burn, so.
Right, yeah. So I was playing with the chance for a burn as well. So Scald is almost universally a safer option when it's super effective than Ice Beam
Mm-hmm.
against Pokemon that are weak to both water and 4 times weak to ice.
Okay.
I was really using Scald as a general move to hit a lot of different things. I also really liked Politoed this metagame because it was one of the most effective uses of Helping Hand alongside maybe Cresselia. So I had the option of using that along with spread moves. It was really wonderful to have the Helping Hand option.
It is one of few bulky waters to get the helping hand move.
Right, yeah.
The other option being like Vaporeon.
Maybe, yeah. Vaporeon's not a very strong Pokemon. Blastoise and Clawitzer also get it, but I don't really like those Pokemon compared to Politoed. Politoed offers a lot more to the team and can be a little bit bulkier.
Weather manipulation in general is probably huge.
Right, yeah, it's a big deal. It ended up being a bulkier spread because of what I was aiming to do with it. Since Politoed is naturally pretty specially bulky, I didn't feel the need to invest much in that, despite the metagame perhaps being progressing towards a more especially by a state, as Kangaskhan falls off in usage, and Charizard, Salamence, and Gardevoir rise in usage. Salamence sometimes running physical sets, and oftentimes not running physical sets at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that nice natural special defense was really helpful, along with the natural speed, which isn't a big deal, but it does outpace Sylveon and Aegislash. So I did get those hits right away, and I had a better chance for Skull Burns. Really, sometimes fishing for Skull Burns is the safest thing to do, since the opponent won't have many ways to knock out the bulky water, and I get a lot of opportunities to fire off an attack, and Skull happens to be a very safe attack with a possible secondary effect that can be extremely useful if I don't need to Spore or Thunderwave the Pokemon later in the match.
So you said you didn't, with only the 4 special defense EVs, you opted for the Wakanberry or Walkenberry just to kind of have that buffer for electric moves?
Yeah, the Citrus Berry was taken up elsewhere on the team with Thundurus, and I didn't actually need to invest much at all in special defense for Wakenberry to block most electric moves from knocking out Politoed outside of stuff that was already really strong, like Specs Thundurus, Thundurus, and stuff like that. So yeah, I felt like that was the best item because most people would try to knock out the bulky water with their Thundurus, which would have Thunderbolt, an electric move, Wakenberry blocks it. Sometimes that would actually end up being a 3-hit KO because of the Wakenberry, which was really useful for getting out more Scalds and increasing my chances of getting a burn, should I need one.
Okay. And then you, kind of a good transition to the next Pokemon. You said the Citrus Berry was taken up by your Thundurus?
Right, Thundurus. Thundurus was my general bulky support Pokemon. I wanted a way to run Taunt, and I wanted increased speed control since my Gardevoir actually isn't running Trick Room like Raphael's was. So Thundurus was offering Thunder Wave to me as well as Taunt. Taunt being effective against Aegislash, opposing Trick Room teams, opposing Thundurus that might swagger me. Just a general safety move, especially against gimmicks. There's stuff you can't even predict to see in a tournament, but a lot of it is setup based. And the really dangerous ones are setup based, stuff like Belly Drum, Gengar Perish Songs, things like that, and those are stopped by Taunt. So I wanted that option as well. I went for Thunderbolt Hidden Power Ice, and I kind of question that decision now, since
questioning why not have really Swagger.
Yeah, why didn't I have Swagger? And that might be a little lame to some of the people watching this, because a lot of people were cheering for me because I wasn't the one using Swagger. But really, I didn't find a lot of use for Hidden Power Ice in the tournament because of Hyper Voice and Ice Beam getting a lot of the same coverage against Dragons and Landorus and things like that, and they were on the team. Swagger might have been useful. I might have also liked to have Protect, which is a kind of rare move on bulky Thundurus.
Interesting. We did see, I think Wolf Glick used down his Thundurus.
I thought that was really smart by him. I could have also gone that route and not really felt bad about it. In terms of the spread, this is actually a really efficient, specially defensive spread that I worked on with Anosh as well.
It's a modest nature.
Right, it's modest, but it's modest with 4 special attack. Basically what that does is it gives me the most possible special attack while also taking the Kang returns, the same things that regular Calm Citrus Thundurus would do, as well as taking 2 Life Orb Sylveon Hyper Voices, so that's 2 Gardevoir Hyper Voices as well, as long as I have the Citrus Berry, so getting 3 at KO'd by that, which was a really big deal for me knowing that those special attacks were going to be popular going to Nationals. 36 speed, of course, actually outspeeds things outspeeding Breloom by 1 point, so I get a little bit of that speed creep and hit 136 speed, as opposed to 135, which is a really common number for more bulky Thunduruses.
Would you argue this is the most optimal Thundurus spread then? Like, literally everyone else uses either Bold or Calm, but this is like the best of both worlds, essentially.
This is a really, really optimized spread. It's really tweaked to perfection to achieve a lot of goals, special and physical. In terms of optimal, like a spread that would achieve the goals for a tournament, like Worlds, I don't necessarily think this is the best spread in existence in the game. I think we're going to see even more special attacking Pokemon going to Worlds. And I think, depending on the tournament, the Thundurus spread will change. This was appropriate because I knew I would see some physical, some special, and I would need stuff for both. In a tournament where I'm predicting a lot of special, I might want to bring a Calm Thundurus that's even more specially bulky than this, because I might want to take even more hits. I'm not sure. What it comes to is trying to pick the Thundurus that fits the metagame it's going into, because the goal of Thundurus should always be to be unbarred from achieving its goal of Thunder Waving a lot of things and taunting a lot of things while getting in some Thunderbolts edgewise. Otherwise, it's not a Pokemon that does a lot of damage, but it is a Pokemon that's supposed to achieve its goals very consistently. So as long as you can make it do that, you can get a lot done with it.
And you'd say the EV spread definitely helped you reach your goals at this tournament.
Right. I really liked having Modest. It hits a higher special attack stat than most calm bulky Thundurus do. So I really liked knowing that I had that little edge over what I could have had or could have brought to the tournament.
Okay.
This was actually changed the day of registration. I know she pointed out that my spread was inefficient and I probably needed to fiddle with it a little bit, so I changed it, and I was really glad that I did afterwards because the bulk was extremely helpful.
I'm glad to hear that much. I know plenty of people who would change things last minute and just regret it the entire day.
Yeah, I was trying to make some changes that I wouldn't regret, I think. So I'm glad I didn't regret it.
So you said this team was made in order from left to right, so can you explain why you followed Politoed up with Thundurus?
I knew Thundurus was really strong in the metagame, and I knew that it was strong with Politoed. I had played them in Athens Regionals, so my first thought immediately was going to Thundurus, because I wanted to pick the Steel last, because I hadn't actually picked Aegislash yet. Okay. But I wanted to pick the Steel absolutely last, because I knew that would be the last thing I wanted for the team. I'd be like, all right, I've got the rest of the team, now what's the Steel part of Rain Steel, so that I can manipulate the team itself and then move into the archetype. So that I wasn't sitting on the archetype and then building around that, but instead I built around the team in the middle of the archetype and then had the archetype as a nice supplement, which is what Rain Steel is, an archetype.
Okay. I respect that.
So I think with that we can move on to Amoonguss.
I agree. So Amoonguss, you said, came up next.
Right, and it came up together with Gardevoir.
Okay. A common duo.
Yeah. It's the Amoonguss Gardevoir combo, or in Japan, the Sanabareru combo. Excuse me. Basically, this Amoonguss was a heavily physically defensive Amoonguss, like many of them are, intended to supplement Gardevoir's kind of pathetic physical defense, even though I ended up EVing it pretty physically bulky, as you'll see later. Basically, what Amoonguss was trying to achieve was getting that extra support, that extra tech, that allowed me to control the game better and set up for Gardevoir using Hyper Voice in the late game. This team is actually pretty difficult to use, in my opinion. It's not easy. Gardevoir is definitely one of the hardest megas to keep control over, because it's so easy to make a mistake with it and lose a lot of health.
Yeah, I can contest to that. I've fiddled around with this team since you've given me the pace spin, and Gardevoir, specifically this spread, it's a bit kind of difficult to work around, just because of the bulk adds something to it, but it still has the defenses of like a piece of paper.
Right, yeah. I mean, that's always the struggle you'll have with Gardevoir. So I think that's part of why Amoonguss Gardevoir kind of showed up, and why we don't see more Amoonguss Volcarona. Or not Amoonguss Volcarona, but Gardevoir Volcarona. Volcarona has those same paper-thin physical defenses, and it's difficult to EV Volcarona to achieve the same things that Amoonguss does. And then Amoonguss also has Regenerator to help control the game. I personally am a really bad Amoonguss player, in my opinion. I've never really used it much before, so there were definitely some poor plays made in the finals of Nationals with Amoonguss. I was not very strong with it when I got into Game 2 and I wanted to use it. But I think overall it was really helpful to have it, and I think if I played it perfectly, it would have been exactly what it was supposed to be for the team. It helped control fighting types, it helped control Kangaskhan if it got out of control, and it gave me an option for a safe Hyper Voice whenever I needed one. If I could get both Amoonguss and Gardevoir in, I knew I could get Hyper Voice, which is a big deal considering how strong Hyper Voice is. In this metagame, it gets a lot of neutral shots on things that aren't named Aegislash or Amoonguss, and Amoonguss is hit by a Psychic pretty hard. Additionally, if that Aegislash was running Wide Guard and not Substitute, or just not Substitute in general, I could definitely Spore it very safely, and that was a really nice option to have. Being able to Spore things as long as I knew they didn't have Substitute or Lumberry really helped me control the pace of the game, especially with the Choice Mon in Landorus and the really frail Mon in Gardevoir. Getting control over the game from a Spore standpoint and keeping the opponent from protecting and making those big, powerful moves wasted was a big deal with Amoonguss. So I was really glad to have it, even if I didn't use it that often.
Yeah. Well, the way you talk about Spore makes the item choice for you make sense. The mental herb. So you don't really worry about Taunt. You can just Spore away.
Exactly. I mean, it gives me a lot of insurance against opposing Thundurus. Thundurus would have been a bigger problem for this team, because being able to Thunder Wave my Gardevoir and ensure that it wasn't a fast Gardevoir means the opponent doesn't have to play the withheld information game anymore, and they also get the additional benefit of me potentially getting parried or hitting myself confusion if they swagger me as well. So Amoonguss having Mental Orb means I can pretty safely get off a Spore against opposing Thundurus. That was also a really big deal against Raphael and what I was trying to achieve right away, because I knew he couldn't taunt me, but since they posted the teams the day before,
he found
out I had Mental Orb and didn't try to taunt me game 2.
He would just swagger right away.
Yeah, he just went ahead and swaggered, which was absolutely the right play, and I don't fault him for it.
I mean, I'm sure he could have found out even if they didn't post it, but like, there's no.
Well, I mean, we were in the same room, but I was going to lengths to try to hide certain things in my team, which might have been a little petty in retrospect. But
everything else,
I'm not really upset about it.
Okay.
But yeah, Amoonguss definitely achieved a lot of things for the team, and the Mental Orb was a huge part of controlling opposing Thundurus, controlling Gengar, actually. If I ever saw those Focus Sash Gengars that run Taunt, Icy Wind, Sludge Bomb, Will-O-Wisp or something, they would often taunt Amoonguss right away, and I could get a Spore, and then I don't have to worry about the Sash keeping me from controlling the Gengar in the match.
Yeah. So we already talked a lot about this Gardevoir that you combined with Amoonguss. We see your very interesting Gardevoir. You already talked about the bulk, but you chose as your third move Hidden Power Fire and about your ability rather than the more definitely more common trace. You opted for Telepathy.
Right.
Can you explain those choices a bit?
So I'm going to start with Hidden Power Fire, since that's probably a question a lot of people have, considering how much of a hole it had potential to put me in finals. And it really made that finals match more of a toss-up. If I could have just Thunderwaved the Heatran and HP grounded it, for example, I would have been in a great spot.
Would have been way more one-sided, yeah.
But because I'm running Rain Steel, I don't get the option of running a Fire type and having it be efficient. An offensive Fire type won't be efficient on my team. At Athens, I did run a defensive Fire type with Rain Steel. The same Rain Steel, actually. Politoed, Thundurus, Aegislash.
With your Arcanine, yeah.
Right, and that was Arcanine. That was a timid Arcanine, meant to control the game with Snarl and Will-O-Wisp, and outspeed, ban Landorus, things like that. But I don't have that Fire type. I don't have any options, actually, against Ferrothorn, or Ferrothorn as it's more commonly known.
Your other option is basically only Aegislash, and once they probably knock that out, they can just prioritize getting Aegislash off the field and just safely sweep with Ferrothorn.
In addition to that, Aegislash wasn't strong. It was substitute lefties Aegislash with 96 special attack investments, so I would miss a lot of KOs. With what would be, like, I missed things like the Helping Hand Shadow Ball against Aaron's Landorus Eye, because I wasn't running much special attack. I was aiming more so for the strong defensive capabilities to keep subs alive and to control the game, even more so with that defensive Aegislash. So basically, Aegislash wasn't helping me against Ferrothorn. So I had to pick something that was going to put pressure on Ferrothorn and keep it from being brought. Or at least after they saw it, because it was best of 3 nationals.
Yeah.
Additionally, it gave me an option to surprise the Ferrothorn if I did see it. Or Ferrothorn, if it hurts your ears for me to say Ferrothorn. If I did see it. So I really wanted to have Hidden Power Fire. I thought that was the safest option, and I was afraid of the Ferrothorn matchup because I would struggle with that matchup a lot. Especially things like Ferrothorn, Melodic. Really difficult for me to play against, because I would try to use Landorus as a counter to the spiny ball-shaped thingy, and it would activate Melodic's competitive, and I would lose the game. So I really needed that alternate option to hit it hard. Hidden Power Fire, not superb. It does 75 to 85% against most Ferrothorn, Ferrothorn, etc.
But it's still an option.
Right, but it's an option, and it does a lot of damage to a Pokemon that's extremely defensive. So it ended up being, in my round 4, that I would have actually dropped that round 4 in game 1, and then probably game 2 and 3, because he would have just continued bringing Ferrothorn.
Yeah.
But I would have dropped that round if I didn't have HP Fire, because it knocked out the Ferrothorn with 2 Thunderbolts tied to it. Because I Thunderbolted it on the Switch and then Thunderbolt Hidden Power Fired it the following turn. So I'm really not regretting the decision. I never really wanted that 4th move slot at any other time. I could still play around Heatran. It was just tough.
Yeah, that's actually a really common thing with Mega Gardevoir. Unless you're relying on Trick Room as your 4th move, the Hyper Voice Psychic Protect is basically just the bread and butter of Gardevoir, and basically all that you need.
And
So that hit
Gardevoir
him.
with very similar constructions to this would run Trick Room instead of HP Ground and not really struggle with Heatran, so I wasn't worried about it, especially since I didn't really care about Trick Room.
Yeah.
In terms of telepathy, it's actually really simple to explain this. I have one Pokemon weak to ground and one Pokemon immune, and that's about it, and I have a banded Landorus.
Yeah.
So I knew I'd be bringing Gardevoir every game. With telepathy, I could switch Gardevoir into those Earthquakes and make them really efficient. I wouldn't be hitting my own Pokemon most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
I only hit my own Pokemon once, as far as I remember, and that was the Politoed when I Helping Hand Earthquaked
Yeah.
my opponent's Gardevoir for the KO, which was a stupid, risky play, but I think what I had to do there.
You could say that.
Right. But I think telepathy was really helpful on Gardevoir, and while I didn't land a lot of switch into Gardevoir EQs the way I would want to, because people actually ended up like predicting it or making a play that countered it, somehow they knew that I had telepathy. Maybe they just didn't see choice, I don't know. Somehow they knew. But basically, Gardevoir could make my combos more efficient, and I wasn't relying on chance to make Gardevoir effective, which I was sometimes in practice. I would go, okay, well, I'll just trace Intimidate and I'll win.
Yeah.
And that was a stupid mindset, because it's kind of scrubby that you should rely on something that isn't guaranteed, especially something that's 50%.
There's actually a lot of situations in which Trace could hurt you anyways, especially because you're running Politoed. You don't want to activate any other weather setting.
Right. I could trace a Drought. I could trace an Intimidate against a Melodic. And Melodic was actually a huge problem Pokemon for this team.
Not a good
I had very, very few ways to hurt it. I think it was almost a bigger problem for Raphael's team. But that's really beside the point.
Yeah, I've had a lot of players lead like Intimidate Milotic against me using a Gardevoir team, just kind of like, oh, they're gonna trace my Intimidate and I'm gonna win.
Right, yeah. It's funnier when you trace competitive and then they switch to Intimidate and you don't Mega. That's funny.
Oh, that's fun. I've had that.
You're +2 guard.
Yeah.
But basically, yeah, I mean, telepathy is a really strong ability. It guarantees a lot of my combinations, my turn combinations with Earthquake, and I really liked the security that it was offering.
We could probably talk about the ability more when we move on to Landorus, but we should glance over this bulky spread that you talked about earlier.
Weird bulky spread, right. So this spread actually lives or survives Jolly Kangaskhan returns 97% of the time.
We take that.
What?
We take those hits.
Yeah, we do take those hits. We take those. The Smash reference. But, yeah, it was a really bulky Gardevoir intended to, again, control the game. I was looking for ways to get guaranteed hyper voices, I think, when I made this spread. And I heard people were using bulky Gardevoir, and I thought, wow, that's really smart. I'll make my own bulky Gardevoir spread and use that. So this was the result.
It still has paper-thin defenses, but...
Right, it's still not taking a lot of physical hits, but it can take some.
It can take
things like
at least
Earthquake.
one.
Right, yeah. I think I can take one of my banned Landorus's Earthquakes. For example, the return I can take. And I still have enough special attack investment. Actually, a lot of Gardevoirs that were really bulky, running something like 252, 188 defenses or something of that nature, would run just 12 or 20 or 28 special attack because Hyper Voice is still so strong coming off of Modest Nature, and since that's the most efficient, that's what I used. The speed is pretty standard on Gardevoir. 24 speed with a Modest Nature, and it's 24 because of Hidden Power Fire, by the way. The 30 speed IV makes it so 20 is not the best, 24 is. And that should put me at 123, which outspeeds Bisharp, which is actually kind of a problem Pokemon for this team since they don't have a lot of ways to KO it outside of Thunderbolt and Scald, which are not super effective. I don't actually have a lot of super effective moves that aren't Landorus, and Landorus...
Yeah, your only stab move is...
not strong against Bisharp.
Not stab. Sorry about that. Super effective move is Landorus, and you don't exactly want Landorus to be dealing with Bisharps.
Right. So I was actually using a slower Gardevoir to start with, which had a little bit more bulk, a little bit more special attack, but I realized that I really didn't want to play against that Bisharp matchup without something with more speed. So yeah, that's the spread. We can move into Landorus if you want.
Sounds good. We already talked about that. You had the choice bands Landorus, the Bando Lando, Bandorus.
Yeah, Bando.
You actually opted for Jolly bands instead. I've seen like people use like careful bands, like oh, it already has 145 base attack. We'll make it bulky.
Actually, Raphael used an even bulkier one. I used enough to take Hidden Power Ices 100% of the time, as far as I was aware. And outside of that, I wasn't too concerned. My big thing was that since this team has an Amoonguss, a bulky Thundurus, and a bulky Aegislash, and a bulky Politoed, I don't already have a lot of ways to deal damage. So
You
making
also
sure I'm
don't
getting...
have much speed.
Right, yeah. So the Jolly and the attack investment, which is actually significant for Choice Band Landorus, if you don't know the Choice Band Landorus metagame. A lot of people run 52, 68, something like that. But 156 is pretty significant for Choice Band Landorus, at least Jolly or Careful or something of that nature. That nature, sorry.
Pun intended.
Yeah, definitely intended there. But basically, I wanted the strong neutral hits from Earthquake because that was a huge part of making the team get those KOs later on in the match. So when I was softening things up with Rock Slide, Earthquake, Superpower, I was able to get the KOs later with Hyper Voice, Thunderbolt, Scald, those kinds of things that I would have later in the game. Landorus ended up functioning as a really early game Pokemon or as an extreme late game Pokemon. If I could clear out all of their Earthquake resists, then I was pretty safe getting into a KO on almost everything on their team with Earthquake. I mean, even things like Ludicolo would take huge chunks of damage from Earthquake. So I really love that utility.
Do you know? Do you know how much U-turn would do to Ludicolo?
As far as I remember, it has a chance to OHKO or it does OHKO. So it's around the 90 to 100% range, depending on the Ludicolo.
That just shows how much an Earthquake would do then, if like a non-stab move like
U-turn it's really strong.
So
Superpower. Actually, a big reason that I picked Band Landorus. I wanted Landorus to answer Kangaskhan really well, and Jolly Landorus' superpower actually OHKOs Kangaskhan. This is what this is meant to do. It's OHKOing Kangaskhan's, one-shotting Kangaskhan's that are meant to survive other Kangaskhan low kicks. So I used my Kangaskhan spread from Athens as my base and superpowered, set my attack on that. So that's why the attack is so high, outside of just neutral hits. It ended up being a little weird because I ran into Kangaskhan's even bulkier than that in the tournament and didn't get KOs with Superpower, and I was kind of shocked by that.
Well, if the Kangaskhan's are even bulkier, that means they're also not getting KOs.
Exactly, and they're not getting KOs in Landorus after I Superpower. So I was getting a lot of pressure from them not being able to knock out things like Gardevoir and Landorus. And if I don't KO with Superpower, then I know for sure that Gardevoir is going to live a return on its own.
That's actually crazy mind games.
Yeah, it was a nice
You have a clear, distinct advantage in those situations.
Exactly. I liked having the clear, distinct advantage in almost all situations with Landorus versus Kangaskhan, since I just didn't want to lose to Kangaskhan because I had Gardevoir. So Amoonguss and Landorus did a superb job of controlling the game against it, and that attack investment on Landorus really got that down. Additionally, Charizard matchup can be pretty tough for Gardevoir teams. So I wanted to make sure that I had a way to knock out Charizard 100% of the time with one move, and that's Choice Band Rock Slide. Charizard can't EV to live that or survive that, so I would always have that be safe. And then even then, a lot of Charizards can't take it even when it's -1, which acts more like a neutral Rock Slide because of the Choice Band. So still a really helpful utility against teams that would have been problematic for Gardevoir. The thing about a Gardevoir team is that you really need to focus on supporting the Gardevoir as best you can, because the Gardevoir has a lot of tough matchups in the form of other Megas, Kangaskhan and Charizard most notably. But if you can control those Megas, its neutral matchups with the strong spread Hyper Voice are so good that your control of the game can be exceedingly good. It's just, or exceedingly positive. It's really the question of making sure that you use Gardevoir to its maximum efficiency and you don't sacrifice it in situations that you don't have to. So that's part of why the team is so tough, because you're playing a Pokemon with paper thin defenses that's used for a spread move, and it's not super fast, like Salamence would be, but Salamence is really bulky.
Like, it's base 100. Everything's like base 100. That's Kangaskhan.
Right, yeah. So you don't get any special benefits with Gardevoir. You're playing the game bare bones with Hyper Voice. And that's tough.
Not to say that Hyper Voice is bad in any means.
No, I don't make any statements like that. So you want to make sure that you play a team and you play your team in such a way that that Gardevoir is as good as it can be. And if it's not good, then you need to not play the Gardevoir, which I actually did when I played Gavin Michaels. I just didn't pick Gardevoir because he had Volcarona Landorus, and I knew, or not Landorus, Volcarona Kangaskhan, I think maybe Landorus. I knew I had no way to stop that team if I brought Gardevoir, because I needed to bring Politoed, Thundurus, Aegislash, and Landorus to control that matchup. I think maybe Amoonguss too would have been fine.
But definitely not Gardevoir.
Right, definitely not Gardevoir. So if the Gardevoir win condition isn't going to work, you have to pick another way. That's also part of the reason that that choice band Landorus was good, because if I was forced to not bring Gardevoir, I still had the strong source of neutral damage the team was based around.
That's fair. So we're now at the end of your team. We kind of made our rain steel sandwich of sorts.
Yep.
You said you actually chose Aegislash last, even though you talked about Politoed, Aegislash a lot in the beginning. Were there any other steals you were considering in this lot?
I thought Metagross was strong, and I still kind of think Metagross is strong.
Non-Mega Metagross?
No. But I was considering not using Gardevoir right away.
Okay.
I thought Metagross was strong with Rain, and I still kind of think Metagross is strong with Rain because of the way that it beats fires. It's really the issue with Metagross is the really poor Aegislash matchup, so I didn't end up picking that. I didn't think there was another superb steel type to abuse the defensive benefits that Politoed could bring outside of maybe Frothorn or Mawile, which are both used on Rain, notably. But I really wanted to pick Aegislash in the end because I realized Gardevoir Aegislash is incredible. Those last three Pokemon, Gardevoir, Landorus, Therian, Aegislash, I've made it a point in my notes to tell myself that those three probably should almost always go together because Landorus is providing the Intimidate for Gardevoir and the control that it does against things like Charizard. And Aegislash is providing the strong neutral matchups and the switch-ins, the strong defensive switch-ins, pivot switches, things like that. For Gardevoir, pivot switch being something where you switch something in specifically to take a hit and then maybe switch it out again. But the strong defensive neutral matchups for Gardevoir that Gardevoir couldn't offer, which it struggled with. Those paper thin defenses that Gardevoir has are completely supplemented by an auxiliary Aegislash, or auxiliary, excuse me. So, that said, I knew that if I didn't have Rain up, then I could struggle against Heat Wave. I would struggle against Earthquake a lot of the time because I still only had 2 immunities, one of them being Landorus. And I wanted an option for Aegislash to block the Earthquake as well.
So Wide Guard was just a given.
Right, Wide Guard was a given. I also was aware that Amoonguss was in the game, that I would struggle against it because I didn't have a lot of ways to stop it outside of Taunt. And that a lot of people were basing their thoughts on Aegislash on the idea of Wide Guard, and if they saw Wide Guard, they wouldn't think the other option. I also knew that it, being a pivot switch, it would take a lot of hits and have good matchups, and if I wanted it to stay in, then it'd be really sweet to have Substitute. So I was like, okay, I want Wide Guard and Substitute. And then I realized that I wanted Wide Guard and Substitute.
Oh, wait.
And I was in a bind, so I played with both.
Shadow Ball and Flash Cannon.
Right, I played with both Substitute and Wide Guard coming up for this tournament. Those days, or the day that I really spent practicing this team specifically, I think I played a little bit with both. But I came to the conclusion after the bus ride over, after playing with it, that I really wanted both Substitute and Wide Guard. I thought they were really strong together. After the fact, I'm kind of sad about the Kangaskhan problems, playing with this team after Nationals.
Yeah, because you can't exactly hit it without Flash.
Right. You need to be really creative about how you deal with Kangaskhan. It's a tough choice in team preview to bring Aegislash against Kangaskhan.
I mean, if you beat everything but Kangaskhan, you can always sub lefties stall with Aegislash.
You actually lose in timer because Aegislash's total HP. Aegislash's total HP is lower than Kangaskhan's 4 HP set. So Aegislash will always lose in that situation. Unfortunately, I would really like it not to be that way, but it is. In terms, so that really covers it. I mean, Wide Guard was the meta call, and Substitute was the neutral matchup call. I think there's kind of a difference between the two things, and this is just kind of theory. But
okay, I'm intrigued. Go on.
When you're focusing on neutral matchup and focusing on things that are good just in general, synergy-wise, you're talking about moves like Substitute that are good for blocking Spore, but also good because they make your Pokemon harder to KO. You're buffing yourself. Things like Flash Cannon, which are good against fairies, but are also good for just hitting a lot of things neutrally. Spreads that have general bulk or general special attack, those 252 spreads, end up working sometimes because they just do enough damage a lot of the time. In terms of specific meta things, you're working to answer specific parts of the game where something like I don't know, this banned Landorus, which was aiming to knock out Kangaskhan, specifically Kangaskhan's with superpower,
Mm-hmm.
um, or the Amoonguss with Mental Herb, which was meant to stop Taunt, Politoed with the EVs to take a return, that kind of thing. That's a meta call. That's a thing where you're trying to answer something that you are aware exists, and you're not just buffing your Pokemon or making them stronger, but you're focusing your efforts on controlling the game against an opponent that you're predicting to exist. So there's a very subtle line between Substitute and Wide Guard, where Wide Guard functions as
a general thing.
No, Wide Guard functions as a meta thing.
As a meta thing.
Landorus, for opposing Charizard, as it always should, because spread moves have to be in the metagame for it to work.
Mm-hmm.
Where a substitute is a more general thing, where it just buffs Aegislash. Like, if you have a substitute up, great. You're in a better position for having a substitute up. It's not something you have to have something else out to use, if that makes sense. So those two things together are what really make this Aegislash stronger than it would be. And I can't help but note that this was first used in Japan, and then it was used by Billa to the top 4, I think, 3 nationals in Europe.
It's coined the name Aegislash by
Aegislash. And really, all you need is Shadow Ball because Ghost coverage is so superb.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like, if you don't have Shadow Ball, oddly enough, Metagross walls you. So like,
right, Metagross walls you.
That's a silly thing.
And you still hit.
So many teams don't have
most of
Mons that resist Ghost, anyways. Like, you need a normal type in Kangaskhan or like a Dark type.
Right, and a lot of teams actually get built without a Ghost resist. This team doesn't have one, which is something I kind of want to overlook because it has 2 resists. So you really restrict yourself trying to build a Ghost resist. So I can prey on that by playing Shadow Ball. It's like a Dragon move in 2013 where there just aren't a lot of resists, and it can get a lot of strong neutral hits. So that was really effective for me, and I really enjoyed having Shadow Ball. I really enjoyed having the set. Even sometimes people might wonder, why not Flash Cannon for Sylveon? Why not Flash Cannon for other Gardevoir?
Mm-hmm.
That would have been nice. Actually, not other Gardevoir, because Shadow Ball hits that, but why not Flash Cannon for Sylveon is a big one. That would be nice, but because I have Wide Guard and Substitute, I control Sylveon really well already. I actually set up on it with Substitute, and I can Wide Guard and stop everything it's trying to do.
Mm-hmm. So I can see lefties being, or leftovers being key, just because you're basically there for so many turns supporting your team that leftovers is the most optimal item for
Aegislash was a big Pokemon I didn't like to switch out. And another reason Leftovers was here, I could have theoretically done Life Orb Sub, which is a little bit inefficient, but not something I hate. But the reason I was really able to run Leftovers was because I had Helping Hand on the team. So once I got that all connected in my head that I really wanted Leftovers, I really wanted Sub, because I had Helping Hand, and I had a lot of speed, actually. I had 68 speed EVs, as you can see. 92 special attack, 76 special defense, and 20 defense altogether. I was capable of taking hits, and I was capable of outspeeding other Aegislash. So if I have Helping Hand, I can knock out other Aegislash, which proved to be a huge benefit against Aaron Zhang in top 4.
Not relying on an item to do that can be. Yeah. That's
right, yeah. And the thing with Life Orb is that it's not even 100% on other Aegislash. So I was more... This team really functioned on a lot of guarantees with the telepathy on Gardevoir, so I couldn't crit myself with Earthquake if I, for some reason, needed to switch Gardevoir. And with the Wide Guard and Aegislash, so I'd always have an Earthquake available, no matter what, even if I had Aegislash out, which was my Earthquake weakness. With the Scalds in the neutral game that we're playing, without having like weaknesses being hit, if I'm just hitting things with neutral attacks, Scald is really great. With Thundurus Thunder Waving things, I'm getting a lot of guarantees. And I'm not playing to chance much at all.
You said this. You kind of built the team around Gardevoir, but the way you were talking about like the Wide Guard, the telepathy, the team molds well together because it also supports the Landorus so much.
Yeah, I think that's also a big thing. The teams should function with more than one objective.
Yeah.
So especially in best of 3, I really wanted to use Double Mega for this tournament because of that. But Landorus is almost a Mega in and of itself.
Yeah.
So I think that's amazing in best of 3 to bring both large options that are big threats and also function very well in the metagame.
I actually can't think of 2 Pokemon that you could have out at the same time that just wouldn't work. Like, I'm looking at every one of the 6 Mons in your team. They just function well together side by side, and that's what a perfect team needs.
I wouldn't call this perfect by any stretch of the
I said
imagination.
a perfect team needed. I didn't call it a perfect team.
Um, I wouldn't call any team perfect by any stretch of the imagination. There are a lot of flaws that this team has, as much as excited as I sound about it.
Mm-hmm. You're
Functionally,
ambitious.
the low physical defense in a general sense means Kangaskhan is harder than it should be.
Mm-hmm.
Means a really, really well played Charizard can be a problem. I don't mind Charizard's elements that much, which is really great for a Gardevoir team. But
Mm-hmm.
I can still theoretically struggle with Metagross. I still did struggle. I mean, I took 10 losses altogether throughout those 2 days and those 3 days actually. So imagining this team as being perfect or being astounding is not possible. I don't think it is for any VGC team. I think what's more accurate is that this team did what it was supposed to do, and it did it consistently.
It won the tournament.
Right, it won the tournament. It may not have put on enough offensive pressure, which is definitely, I think, true. I could have definitely used a little bit more special attack in Aegislash instead of the defense that I invested, which it takes +1 Kangaskhan Sucker Punches. But I don't regret using Aegislash. I don't regret using the speed or the set itself.
Mm-hmm.
I think in any team there are flaws, and this team certainly has its own. But what it comes down to is picking a team that functions well in the metagame, that makes the right meta calls, the right parts of the team are optimized to fit into teams that you're expecting to see, and a little bit of luck, which I definitely had some of, and a player that's trying to be consistent, that's doing his best to play every game to the top of his ability. So hopefully, or the top of their ability, hopefully I can continue that. Hopefully other players will continue that, because I don't know how long I'll stay in the Pokemon community now. I've been here for 6 years.
Same. It's been a
It's
wild
been a
ride.
while, and I'm going to college kind of soon. But I really hope to see those players that bring their all to every game, that come into it with all the heart and the passion and the sportsmanship that we desire from this community. And I hope that we see players that are really focused on using their team to the best of its ability. Even teams like this that are hard can be brought and done well with. I think that's part of the reason I made a lot of the mistakes, actually, just because it was so hard. But
Yeah.
because there were mistakes all over the place in the stream matches and such. There was no autopilot.
I just think you're way too modest. Just like this team, half the Pokemon being modest. So want to throw
Actually,
that.
is it
But
4 of them that are modest? It's 4.
4? Oh yeah, Politoed's modest. Yeah. Yeah, you and your team are the perfect fit, because I just remember after you won nationals, the first thing you said is like, "Oh man, that game too."
I mean,
perform.
I think my objective is to always be critical of my mistakes, so that when I come into another tournament, I learn. What I have learned. I think that's like the big thing with a competitive attitude, that you go into a tournament with the idea of, I'm learning here. I am gaining knowledge and I'm progressing. And you view yourself as someone who's progressing forward on a timeline rather than someone who's stuck in a single spot. So, yeah. I wanted to pay attention to the game too. I didn't want to let it fade from my memory that I played it poorly, that I played Amoonguss poorly. But I think I was happy with the team overall, and I think it did what I wanted to do, and it played like an extension of myself, which was really what I was hoping for from the team that I brought to the tournament.
And I think that's the truest you can get with the Pokemon team. So, Toler, that's your team. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
I enjoyed this. I learned a lot, that general and meta talk that kind of blew my mind there. So thanks for adding a lot more to this experience. If you
Sorry if I made it a little long.
Hey, we had no timer on this. I don't care. Pokemon has timers.
15 minutes, man. 45 minutes total. I don't know.
People will love this. All right. Thanks for watching. Follow Toler at, it should say above me, Dim Sunlight. I'm Blitz and Burst. If you like this, subscribe. We'll have more videos soon. Toler's not the only one I'm interviewing. Don't feel that special, Toler. I'm going to have all of the Boiler Room members who made Day 2 of Nationals come on and interview with me, and we're going to talk about their teams. And
we're hoping, I think we're hoping with this to open up about what we're doing. I mean, I'm the long-winded one, and then when it comes down to it, I doubt you'll get
passion, Toler.
quite the speech.
You basically just, you're the artist. the musical one. This
But
is to be expected of you.
we're all just hoping to share with you guys the best that we can, how we think about the game, and how that translated into our teams, because this game is hard. No one's going to tell you that. No one outside of the game is going to tell you that. But the way I feel, I mean, any game that you're playing against other people is hard. So I'm just hoping that people looking at this, people watching this, will see that and see that they can always keep improving. That you're never stuck, right? Like, you shouldn't ever feel like you're stuck, because even if you are stuck, you can get unstuck, if that makes sense. Okay, that's all. Sorry, platitudes.
It's fine. And with that, it's been Blitz and Dim.
Yeah.
And that's all. Thanks for watching.